Greetings to all. The scripture reading from which this week's point to ponder arises comes from the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 21, one of the scripture passages appointed for the 9th Sunday after Pentecost. The passage tells the story of the feeding of the 5,000, a story in which Jesus feeds the crowd, beginning only with the little bit of food the disciples have on hand, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus takes this little bit of food, blesses it, breaks the bread, then gives it to his disciples to distribute to the crowd. And all ate their fill, with food left over. Which leads us to our point to ponder for this week. Even a little can be more than enough. To ponder that point with me is my son, Paul Browne. Paul is a veteran of the war in Iraq and former pastor of a non-denominational Christian congregation in Connecticut. So, Paul, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I grew up here in East Tennessee, and after high school, I joined the Navy. Had an opportunity to go out and see the world, more or less. Afterwards, I began to work for a Christian non-denominational church up in Connecticut. And at some point, I decided that I wanted to go back to school, so I left my position and I went to school. And I studied anthropology and philosophy at the University of Michigan. And after working for about a year after graduating, I came back home, and here I am.
So what I think we might start with is, given the story of the feeding of the 5,000, and the point that came to me from that was that even a little can be more than enough, and that's true in lots of different circumstances. So why don't you just start in wherever you would like to start?
Yeah. So in preparation for this, I looked at the Bible verse, and I wanted to see why at this time do we see a record of feeding the multitude with bread and fish. And I remember this story from when I was a kid, and I've seen it many times in my life. But I was trying to think of it in a new light, perhaps. And so, I started at the beginning of the chapter and realized that, it was Herod's birthday, and a young maiden girl had asked Herod what he would like, or there was an exchange between them, and it was decided that he wanted the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And then right after, the beheading of John the Baptist, you see this scenario with Jesus feeding the multitude. And I began to think about that. Why at this time did Jesus do this? And after the feeding the multitude, he also walks on water in front of his disciples and tries to encourage them to have faith. And I realized that the social environment at that time must have been one of great fear. I mean, here's Herod, the leader of the area, and he's instilling fear into the hearts of the people by murdering John the Baptist. And so his attempt is to basically rule by this kind of authoritarian view. And in this instance, Jesus moves away from that area, and the crowds follow him. And when the disciples see that, they say, look, we don't have enough. We don't have near enough to take care of these people. And that's when you get to this point that you mentioned, that it is enough. A little is enough. And I thought about that, and in these times when we have a very similar situation, where leaders to instill fear into the people, and it's easy to lose hope. It's easy to think like the disciples did initially, to think that it's not enough. We don't have enough to move forward, to make the changes that we need to make, to put into practice the reforms and all the other kind of societal, legal, any kind of implementation that we need to do to really make the quality of life better for everyone. It seems like we don't have enough at the time. And then, so I think this situation really rings true in this time, because it seems like we don't have enough, but it is.
And I wonder if at other times, can you look back on any other times, either in your life, and have you seen evidence that sometimes just a little can be enough?
So, yeah, so I've had some hardships in my life. Times where I lost hope, and it was really easy to give into despair. And looking back, I really held on to like just one notion, that it can't be like this forever, and that there has to be a time when my circumstances will change. I'll get better, or they'll get better, or something will happen, so that the pain that I'm going through now is not going to endure forever. And it is just a little, it's kind of a little hope, but it's carried me through a lot. And so I guess in that sense, yeah, that kind of little message was always a message of encouragement, that I need to press on, that I should not give up, that I should continue and endure, and continue to try, rather than giving into despair.
So when you take your own experience and you look back at what you described so well as the situation today, and as you see people in danger of losing hope, or feeling like, well, there's just no use in doing anything. There's no use in voting. There's no use in trying to do anything. There's no use, and the problems are too big. What would you say to them at this point?
Perhaps it's always easier to destroy than it is to create. And if we realize that we have just a little bit, we can use that little bit to create a better future. And so I think the trick is not that we don't recognize the dire circumstances that we are in, but that we recognize that we are already endowed and equipped with the tools, with the things that we need in order to try. And it is enough. We just need to use them. And that can be scary. But hang on, because it's, the difficulties and the hardships, they'll pass, and we'll have moments in the sun, and then we'll have moments in, difficulty again. And that's part of being here on the earth.
To me, it seems to be a good reminder to people that we're not expected to do it all.
Right.
And I just wonder, have you seen that in action before, where it was about a lot of little things coming together, and then becoming more than what any one person could have put in?
I think any successful story is that.
Mm-hmm.
You have an instance of a lot of small things coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Take, for instance, our notion of success largely depends on this idea that I do everything, that I take hold of my fate and wrestle with it until it succeeds to my will. um, but in my experience, I've never had much success when I did things that way. Um, in my experience, success has always been a bunch of little things that I did each day consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time they add up. And then at some point we look back and say, wow, that was successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, the key point is that you can't give up.